This summer I was 12. The old house wore the sunlight like a thin, forgiving smile. It stood at the edge of the village, where the road curled away and left you with only cicadas and the salt air that clung to the boards of the veranda. Inside, the air smelled of lemon and bread that had cooled in the kitchen long before noon. My friend Lena lived next door, a girl with hair like bent corn and a secret laugh that sounded sometimes in a room that wasn't ours to enter. We found the house generous in those days, as if it believed in our small beginnings, even after the church bells had stopped ringing for the noon. We had a game that felt almost holy in its simplicity. We would set a tiny chipped teacup of milk on the sill of Lena's kitchen window, and then we'd whisper a name, someone we missed, someone who might listen from the shadow side of walls that remembered more years than we could count. It was Lena who taught me how to listen with the corners of our mouths pressed tight, as if to keep the sound inside our throats from leaking out. The ritual was silly, perhaps, but it mattered to us. The house listened in its patient, creaking way, and the windows sometimes fogged without a breath of wind, and there were times when a chair in the dining room swayed, as if someone invisible had paused there to rest. Lena believed the house was a living thing with a heartbeat, and perhaps she was right about the heartbeat. It thumped, soft as moth wings, beneath the floorboards, in rooms we were not yet allowed to enter. We called the name of a girl who had vanished from the village a generation before us, the name that carried its own rumour, as if a thread from the past could be tugged and pulled until it frayed the present. Her name was Mara, and she had left behind a piano that never learned to forget. The adult shrugged and told us that Mara's mother had moved away, that Mara had just run out of the town and out of the world, that some doors close and never reopen. But we did not believe that fully, Lena and I. We believed in stories that kept us close to the walls, in light that made patterns we could trust. There came a summer when Mara's rumour grew heavier, heavier than the summer heat, and I found myself standing in the attic with Lena, our elbows brushing the loose rafters as It was there we laid the teacup on a nail driven into the plank, and in the quick hush that followed, Lena leaned close and asked the question we whispered to no one in particular when the grown-ups weren't listening. Nara, are you listening to us now? The house sighed. The doorframe breathed out a slow exhale, like a tired animal waking from sleep. A draught circled the room, and the milk in the cup trembled in its thin shell as if a finger had brushed it from beneath the surface of water. In that tremor, I felt the peculiar, intimate ache of guilt, as though Mara's absence carried something we could have prevented, if only we had spoken more truthfully about the danger of summer secrets. The memory of that breath-tiny, almost inaudible, stayed with me long after Lena's voice returned from the edge of the attic, telling me we should close the seam and leave Mara in peace where she had chosen to go, if she chose to go at all. The night Mara vanished, or rather, the night the storm rose like a dark mouth over the house, I slept in a room that had no right to feel so full of shadow. The thunder was a drum who's been kept in the house too long, and the rain came down in a way that felt almost like handwriting. Each drop a careful letter written by someone who knew where the words would land. I woke to the sound of the attic door giving a quiet sigh, sound that wasn't supposed to be audible in the downstairs rooms, and a scent of lilac that did not belong to our kitchen, though our lilacs bloomed on the fence outside. Lena slept in the bed opposite mine, her breathing even and calm, as though she had dreamed a map of routes we had yet to walk. In the morning, Mara's mother was waiting at the door with the kind of quiet that presses the world away just enough to pretend nothing happened. She spoke of a family meeting, of a search that would begin at dawn, of the need to tell the truth even when truth hurts more than the lie did. The truth, I learned, was not some grand confession, but a moment when courage refused to choose one side over the other. Mara was gone, and our naive rituals, the milk, the names, the walls remembering, seemed to shrink under the weight of the ordinary world's insistence that life must go on. I did go on, of course. The summer ended, and the next came with its own weather, its own small windows that could be opened and shut. I moved to the city for a while, studied things I did not fully understand, and learned to live with an ache that never quite organized itself into a coherent memory. The old house stayed behind on the hill like a patient witness, its windows always too bright in the afternoons. Its door sometimes open just a fraction, as if it were listening for a softer key to turn in its old lock. Years later, when the winters grew longer and the days thinner, as if time itself were wasting away, I found myself returning to the house with my own hands weathered and tremulous. The kind of tremor that makes you feel as if your veins have learned a language your tongue cannot quite pronounce. The village had changed in the way villages change when the world moves a little faster than memory allows. Yet the old house remained, stubborn and generous, preserving its stubborn insistence that the summer of our childhood was of consequence to something more than a few children who believed the walls remembered. Inside, the rooms carried a peculiar quiet, as though the house itself had aged in sympathy with me. The attic access now felt less like an escape hatch and more like a patient door opened with care. The seam I had once pried open as a girl remained, though the boards that hid it had grown dull and unbroken in the years since Mara disappeared. The cup that had once held milk in our childish ritual sat on a shelf in Mara's old room, filled again, as if the house kept vigil over us without judgment. The scent of lilac drifted once more through the air, and I felt a pressure, not physical, but moral, as if the house asked me to tell the truth I refused to tell as a boy. The truth began with a breath I could hear and feel in the bones of the house, a soft exhalation that rose from the floorboards when I stood in the doorway to Mara's room. There, under the dust-ridden window, I found a small box, the kind a child might stash away in fear or for hope, something private and fragile. It contained two things, a faded photograph and a letter, both written in handwriting that I recognized as my own, though I could not recall ever having written it in that form. The photograph showed Mara and me, young enough to mistake a shadow for a friend.